It is time to paint Zagreus's face. I've mixed up some Vitreous Paint. This is a paint that's made from very finely ground glass. It's ground down into a powder, and then I mix it with a liquid to make a paint. Once the painting is finalized, the piece then goes into a kiln, and that melts the surface of the glass, and it melts the glass that's in the paint so that they fuse together, so that this paint becomes a permanent part of the glass. It's the same technique that they use in places of worship where you see the apostles and whatnot, and you see their faces painted on the glass. It's the same sort of vitreous paint that they use to do that sort of work. It's difficult to paint on glass. It's not like painting on paper. Paper is absorbent. So I'm sure you've seen washing your car. Liquids want to bead and not really flow across smooth glass surfaces in other mediums like paper. So my technique is really just to get the paint on the glass where it needs to be. I'm not really focused on accuracy right now. I'm just trying to get the paint down. And what I do is I let the paint dry, and then I come in with my bamboo skewer and I sort of clean up the image. And this paint is glass particles suspended in liquid, so they tend to settle. So I've got to make sure I get enough in there so that once it dries and it's fired in the kiln and everything, it's nice and opaque. I think that just about does it. I think I've got everything covered. Let me turn off my overhead light so I can get a little more visibility. Make sure I've got all my bases covered. And it looks like I do. I know there's a little bit of shading in here, but that's not black. I'm only trying to get black down right now. You know, he's actually got a little line up here. I'm just going to put in a thick dab of paint so I can find that line later. I think that's going to do it for now. We're going to go ahead and let this dry. It's propylene glycol, so it's going to take a long time to dry. And then I'm going to come back in with my bamboo skewer and do some reverse sketching and clean up these lines and hopefully make it look like the original. The paint has dried now, so I'm going to go ahead and start using my bamboo skewer and cleaning up these lines so that they look like the original image. Now that we've done the black line work, I want to do his shading. This has been fired in a kiln now, that first layer of black paint. So since this has been fired in a kiln, that paint is now fused to the surface of the glass. There's a couple layers of shading. Right now, specifically, what I'm going to be working on is the darker layer. So this dark layer that's up here and around his eye, and then he's got a little bit more down here underneath his nose. We're gonna paint that. Once that dries, scrape that out and clean up those lines, fire it in the kiln, and then the last pass of shading is gonna be this lighter shade. Just like last time, I'm gonna be applying this without really paying any mind to accuracy. I just wanna get it on the glass everywhere that it needs to be. His eye, this comes down a little bit. Doesn't come down that far, but better to have too much than too little. It looks a little smudgy, and that's fine. I have this blending brush. This is a badger hair brush. It has very, very fine tipped hair. It's really good for blending. And what I can do is use this. I'm going to go a little heavy at first. It doesn't even really look like I'm touching the glass. But I'm just lightly going over it with a little bit of a heavy hand at first, because I want to kind of just spread that paint around, but you can see those lines already softening. And then I'm going to come in with a quicker, lighter touch. And that's going to give it kind of a nice, even, almost airbrushed look. Pretty pleased with that. So we're going to let that dry and then come back in with our trusty bamboo skewer and clean up those lines. And now for the final layer of shading. This has come out of the kiln. It's nice and smooth, fused to the glass. I also made his, it was driving me crazy not being able to see his green eye. I really wanted to see what that looked like, so I got that done. There's a little preview of how that's going to look. I really like that shade of green, that nice bright green. I've mixed up some vitreous paint here. It's very thin, meaning it's mostly liquid, because I want a very light shading here. I'm just going to put a nice layer everywhere. And I can scrape away what I don't want once it's dry. Just kind of tapping it to try to even out the distribution. Coming in with that badger brush to kind of smooth out the paint. And then we'll begin our scraping away. Now that that's had a chance to dry, I'm gonna scrape away and find those lines. I realize this is a very subtle shading. It's really just to add depth. And it's true to the original art. It's a very cel-shaded art style. I think that's gonna just about do it for his face. I'm just gonna clean this up with a cotton swab, pop this back in the kiln, and we'll call it a day on Zagreus' face. If you'd like to commission a piece, message us through our Etsy store at the web address in the description below. Be sure to like and subscribe, and visit us at our website at jupiter-glass.com.